We're gonna start with the Dune book review as I build the Iron Reef here. So the positives of the book, as someone who watched the movies first and then got into the books, I would say is that if you're reading it after having watched the movies, it's not any less addicting, right? It doesn't spoil anything. There are a bunch of stuff here that the movie has missed, and there's a bunch of stuff in the books there's a bunch of stuff in the books that the movie doesn't have, but there's a bunch of stuff in the movies that the books doesn't have. They are both missing things that the other has. What I mean by that? What I mean is that we're gonna wait for these villagers to restock. What I mean is that the book is much more philosophical than the movie is. Uh, that being said, it misses a bunch of the action scenes, so it builds up the heat of the moment, but it doesn't show it pay off. You really don't see it. Um, well, you see very few fights, but most of the important fights and most of the important events are kind of like brushed over very lightly, or you see it from a completely different perspective that just doesn't have the same like effect, right? Whereas in the movies, you get those big action pieces, you get the sequences that are really nice for the really nice eye candy. Unfortunately, you miss out on the philosophical bits that make the book so great. That being said, each not adaptation, but each version does what it sets out to do masterfully. So the movie does what it does extremely well, despite missing a few bits, and the book also does what it does extremely well, despite missing out a few bits. The movie does a really good job of building up the world, making it very clear that you are in a very expanse universe. That this isn't just like some other space story, right? Like dense, this is a deep and very not technologically advanced world. Not okay, well, not focused on the technology, still technologically advanced, but focusing more on advancing the human mind rather than the human technology, right? And I think that's a very interesting take. I think it makes it for a very refreshing read, especially when a lot of sci-fi these days or in general across time, has been focused purely on just, oh, look at this advanced technology I have. Look at me. We're in the future. We have better guns. We have better weapons, better ships. Our planets have more technology on them, right? We can time travel. We can go ships. We can use ships that go at light speed. We can add cybernetic body arms, right? We can make all these fancy weapons, right? It gets to a point where it all blends in and it's all kind of the same, like in Star Wars, for example, where it's just like you're in the future, but it also looks like the past, and eventually technology just keeps improving, but it doesn't matter because it's not the focus of it, really. And so it's not interesting to you, right? You know what I mean? Like they can improve, they can make a bunch of different kinds of lightsabers, and they have, but it's not interesting ultimately. It's cool, it's not interesting. In the Dune books, it focuses more on expanding the human mind and giving a new like scope, giving a new like viewing glass of what the future could look like for a humanity that focused more on expanding the psychological capabilities of man, right? One example would be there's a scene that happens in the movies, though not the same way. It's the scene where Jessica. I'll just say spoilers right now. Spoilers right now. It's a scene where Jessica gets poisoned and she takes the water of life. It happens a little differently, but in long story short, that's what happens, right? In the in the movies, what happens is she takes the poison and she fights it, right? And she overcomes it. And the only reason we know she overcomes it is because Paul, the entire time, is on the outside and he's explaining what's going on. He's saying, my mother has been trained to like rework the poison when it's in their body, so she's not scared of dying to the poison. She might feel threatened, but she's not gonna die. She'll be fine, right? And ultimately, that is what happens. Jessica does survive the poison, but we don't really see much of that, like how she reworked the poison, right? In the books, she drinks the poison, and we get the answers to our questions. We see how she does it. So what happens is she drinks the poison, and she starts thinking to herself, and she's thinking like, oh, I know what I know what the molecules of this poison I know what molecules this poison consists of. If I can think really closely and focus really intent, like really hard, I can think of every molecule that the poison is made out of, change a few of them, and then I can change the overall composition of the poison's molecular structure, therefore making it not fatal when I drink it. And the entire time we see her thinking of it, we see her thinking of like the atoms, the molecules that she has to change in order to overcome the poison of the poison, right? And I thought that was really cool. I was like, that's kind of sick. I've never seen that before, right? Usually, like if this was Star Wars, right? Let's use an example. If this was Star Wars, instead of that, we would just be getting, oh, here we have the antidote to this poison, or here we have this device that can just suck out the poison, right? That's what you would get. And in most sci-fi stories, that is what you would get. You would just get a simple poison device, right? But in Dune, it does a really classic, not classic. It does a really fresh take on an idea like that, right? Where yeah, in theory, with the technology of the people in Dune, of what's going on, they absolutely could make a device that sucks the poison out. They absolutely could, but this is so much more unique, right? Another example is the ornithopters in Dune, just like you see in the movies, albeit not the same. In Dune, the ornithopters resemble animals, and in this case, they resemble birds. In the book, they more closely resemble birds than beetles, like in the movies, and beetles and dragonflies. So in the movie, you see the wings are are rigid, metallic, and they vibrate at a frequency, right? They don't flap. Well, they flap rapidly, but it's more robotic and it is more like vibrating, right? Vibrating in the air. In the book, the ornithopters, and I'll have a picture of a book accurate ornithopter. In the books, the ornithopter is more closely described as a bird. So um, whenever there's an ornithopter in a scene, it's described as the wings flapping elegantly, banking to the left. One of the metal feathers get jammed or something, right? Or when it's diving, just like in the movie, how when it dives, the insect wings pull back in and go rigid. In the book, the wings fold in like how a bird dives, like how imagine a peregrine falcon. You know those birds that dive whenever a bird dives. Imagine that. It's a metallic object that moves, just that looks like a bird, moves like a bird, but still has those futuristic traits. Like the way it generates lift is still through not only through the wings. The wings kind of act as like stabilizers, and and uh, and like you like stabilizers, but there's also jet engines, right? So they'll describe, oh, when the ornithopter, like when the engine gets ignited, you hear this loud, just like boom of the engine go, and then the wings flap. So you get this like wonderful mix of futuristic technology, but this very unique take on an advanced vehicle, right? And now there are some vehicles that are just straight up futuristic, like the freighters and like the cargo ships, which is just like a really big spaceship that transports other ships and stuff like that. That stuff is that stuff is like the generic one, but in the defense of the book, you spend very little time with them. They're not that important, and as a result, you just don't spend a lot of time with them, right? The ones you spend most time with are very accurately described. Um, another positive is that the characters feel really unique. Not all of them, however, which is one draw side. Some characters have like how do I say it? Some characters just aren't memorable. Like you spend some time with them, but they aren't memorable. There's no like shtick about them. They're not unique. You know what I mean? So ultimately, you hear them, you see them, you spend some time with them, but they fade away. And the next time you see them, you're thinking like, "Oh, who is this person?" Right? And even some of the more important characters, they don't really have, in my opinion, a personality, right? Like for me, most the only one I can think of at the moment is Thufir Hawa. He's the mentat for the Atreides family. In the movie, he's played by, I have no idea who he's played by in the movie, but I can show an image of him. This character in the book, we spend a much more hefty amount of time with him than we do in the movies. Plenty of scenes with him. Unfortunately, in my opinion, he's like a very, it feels like Frank Herbert was trying to do a person that's militaristic but also still human in a way. But unfortunately, that means you don't get a personality because you're trying to be a bit of both. You end up not like it's kind of like having a pool by the ocean, right? You dip your feet in the pool, you dip your feet in the ocean. You're trying to enjoy both, but you can't because you're not fully in either one of them, right? Just like in the book, just like that. Thufir Hawat, at times his character is very militaristic, very to the nines, but at some other times he tries to be much more human, and it just makes it less. His character feels not like a character, like a person, right? Like I can't picture characters getting along with him. I can't picture even in the movie he really didn't have that much of a personality. I cannot picture his character, right? I can see him, but I don't feel his presence in the room, right? I don't feel weight and like and whenever his life was in danger, which everyone's life is in danger in this book at some point, I just didn't feel a connection because it doesn't feel like I'm reading a character, right? Now, with most people, that's not a problem. With Leto Atreides, you feel the fatherly figure. He has a really good. He's very well written. You really feel his presence when he's there. Jessica, more so than him, I would say. I would say her presence more so than anyone. Maybe second, I'd say, if not the best, second only to Paul, has the biggest presence. Paul, absolutely. Chani, uh, kind of isn't that like like right, like she plays a big role, but I wouldn't say she plays a big role, you know what I mean. Stilgar is one of those characters that I absolutely felt the presence of, and I could definitely feel his character. He like really like bled through the screen. You really like felt his presence. Fade Raltha was very unique in the book. The Baron comes off almost exactly like in the movies, just a bit more calculating and cold, just a tad bit more. The Reverend Mother, Gaius Mohayim, Helen Mohayim, whatever her name is, the first Reverend Mother we see, she's about the same in the book, which is a good thing because she was good in the movies. So no complaints there. The Princess Irulan, she gets like 3 lines, so no complaints there, because she doesn't play that big of a role. I'm trying to think of who else. There was one character that I'm thinking of that was like a standout. I remember Gurney because Gurney was like the hard militaristic character of the book, whereas Thufir Hawa was trying to be militaristic but still friendly and human and with the people. Gurney was just straight militaristic, and it made it very easy to picture him. Made it very easy to understand his character, to follow him, and then just overall picture him in your mind. Um, these villagers aren't restocking, by the way. They're just actually just not restocking. Who else? I'm thinking of a character that was just like wow. Oh, Duncan Idaho. Funny enough, plays almost zero of a role. Because his death is glossed over, which is a nitpick that I'm gonna bring up later. He really just doesn't exist, which is a shame because in the movie he very much does exist. Uh, I'm trying to think of the character. What was the name of the character? Oh, what was the name of the character? It was one that really stood out. Oh, I remember. I don't know how to say his name. Uh, it's the Harkonnens Mentak. Here it is. DeVries. Peter DeVries. He dies in the first movie, and in the book he dies the exact same way. Peter DeVries' character compared from the book to the movies, two completely different people. Completely different people. I was reading it and I was like, holy crap, like this is a completely different character. I was like, the movie missed out on so much of this character, or at least he left it out. Granted, he doesn't really do a lot in the grand scheme of things, so ultimately you really like as a moviegoer, you didn't miss out on much, but in the books, his character, he's the one that by far, he's like third in place. That like when you're reading his lines, you really picture him, and he really stands out in the limelight from every other character because he's so unique, he's so different. His dialogue just feels so rich, and it just feels so lively, in my opinion. Yeah, pretty much. In the I will say for the downsides, there are plenty of moments where Frank Herbert just gets way too what's the word for when you're trying to like, do a lot, like you aspire. I can't explain it. But in the books he's very like he's setting up a bunch of stuff. He's explaining a tremendous amount of things, and there's a lot to this world that you have to soak up like a lot of it, and at times it can get not only disorienting but overwhelming. Few more You're more likely to be disoriented than overwhelmed. Very often you're not going to get that many details all at once, but the details that you do get will throw you off because they come out of nowhere, like a detail like poison snoopers, or what the ornithopters look like, or characters that you just never met before but somehow for some reason play an equally important role. uh, right? Like there are plenty of times where he gets way too ambitious. Ambitious is the word, and you get lost. He gets like lost in the sauce, which takes you out. But as long as you like read back a few lines, or you like stop and analyze, or you just look it up, you just look it up. Um, you immediately get back into it. And I know there's like books where you can read the lore, but I'm of the belief that a book, unless it's a sequel, unless it's a sequel and not a standalone sequel, a sequel, it can only be a sequel unless it's a sequel. The book should explain itself, right? So, as this being the first Dune book I've read, and knowing that it starts here, right? I shouldn't have to read other books that explain the lore, right? I shouldn't have had to watch the movie to know what an ornithopter looks like, or what the Harkonnens look like, or what the homeworld looks like, or what these characters are, right? You shouldn't have to do that for anything. The book should be explaining itself to you, which this book does really well for the grand majority. But there is that 1% where it doesn't, takes you out. That is a big downside. But other than that, the book is really well written. The lines go hard at the end of the book. Frank Herbert's dropping some of the most like some of the coldest, some generational bangers in there that I had to stop and read like 5 times to go like, holy shit, like this is biblical levels of like fire writing, right? Like as I read it, my hands were like shaking because I was holding the book like it was a hot potato because it was so fire, right? Every once in a while you'll get a quote like that, and especially towards the end of the book, Frank Herbert pops off. Other than that, really, those were my complaints. Those were my upsides, downsides. The book was really good. I'd give it a 4 out of 5 stars. There's a lot of stuff here that the book could improve upon, especially with the added context, added details, and the glossing over of a bunch of different things that it should have spent more time on. It spends way too much time being philosophical. Doesn't give enough time on actually, giving a satisfying conclusion to a storyline that it was building up to, right? So that's a downside. But other than that, really, the book is really solid. Recommend it. I wouldn't say this is a book you have to read more than once unless you don't understand English. And you shouldn't have to read it more than once. Just go back like one chapter, read it over again. Yeah, I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. So that's a good review from
Narrator.
from me.
Narrates all.
Okay. Accidentally turned on the narrator.
Use mouse cursor or tab button to select narrator. Narrator. Off.